It's important to say that the opinions shared in this episode are just that, and they're ours alone. I urge each and every one of you to do your own homework before making any decisions.
The thing I always say, if you gave Leaving Neverland 4 hours of your life, or 3.5, depending on which cut you saw, it's like, give 10 to 15 minutes to learn the truth. Like, just go down that rabbit hole and learn the lies that they have been telling you for 30 years about Michael Jackson, and they'll surprise you.
This is Taj Jackson, Michael Jackson's eldest nephew. While much has been said about Taj's uncle over the years, he was undoubtedly one of the world's greatest entertainers, and he was remembered as such all the way through his tragic death in 2009. It wasn't until 2019, 10 years after Michael Jackson's passing, that the narrative officially shifted in response to an HBO documentary, Leaving Neverland. The film focused solely on two men who had previously vehemently defended Michael Jackson, but now claim that they weren't being truthful, where they chronicled years of alleged abuse by the pop star in explicit detail. The accusations were graphic and shocking, and in the age of Time's Up, pushed fans in Hollywood to take immediate action, promptly erasing Michael Jackson's legacy and seemingly confirming him as a monster. While I did take the accusations seriously, I never liked how quickly we all were to cancel Michael Jackson. It's important to remember, back in 1993, and then again in 2005, just how hard Michael Jackson was pushed by the FBI for the same allegations.
They served a search warrant on me which allowed them to view and photograph my body, including my buttocks, my lower torso, thighs, and any other area that they wanted. The warrant further stated that I had no right to refuse the examination or photographs, and if I failed to cooperate with them, they would introduce that refusal at any trial as an indication of my guilt. It was the most humiliating ordeal of my life, but if this is what I have to endure to prove my innocence, my complete innocence, so be it.
His entire life and body were exposed for all. Jackson couldn't have been more vulnerable to get caught. Twice! Suddenly, others had every opportunity to finally step forward and save other children, but none did. In both criminal cases, Jackson was acquitted. As I went back to actually revisit the case, it became clear that the parents were really the ones leading the charge, not the child. And they weren't doing it for justice. They did it for a payout. It was no wonder why Jackson won his criminal case. They couldn't prove he did any wrongdoing. As I learned why he actually had to settle his 1993 civil case, along with the countless other shakedowns for money, and Leaving Neverland accuser Wade Robson's testimony defending Michael Jackson.
On line 18, you're asked, Mr. Robson, did Michael Jackson ever molest you at any time? And you said, absolutely not, correct?
Correct.
And that was a lie, right?
That was a lie, yeah.
Okay.
I knew there had to be much more to this story than HBO was wanting to show us. Now, I understand the topic of Michael Jackson is a polarizing one for many, but I don't like these lifelong supporters of him waiting until after his death to come forward with such serious allegations. If they're telling the truth, think of all the other children that they potentially put in jeopardy. And why did they wait until they were both in tough financial situations to come clean? Some are quick to declare that they weren't paid for the documentary, but to imply that they can't make other monetary gains from the exposure of this film would be foolish. While it's true that no one can really know what truly happened, I saw Taj out there loudly defending his uncle, trying to shed more light to the facts that were being ignored in Finding Neverland. Taj was a boy at those infamous Neverland sleepovers. He was a confidant during the 1993 case about his uncle. Yes, he's part of the Jackson family, but he also openly reveals that he himself was a victim of abuse as a child. He talks about how that gave him a keen eye to know what a predator actually does. And his uncle, Michael Jackson, was not one. Taj wants his uncle to be heard, and I was happy to help him shed some light that hopefully inspires many of you to do your own additional research. I'm Andy Signore, and this is Hugging the Cactus. To ensure you never miss a story, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to all alerts. It's the only way to ensure that YouTube will keep us in your feed. I'm here with Taj Jackson. Thank you so much for joining us, Taj.
Thank you for having me.
This is a really important episode for me because I'm a huge Michael Jackson fan. And I feel like there have been times where the media tells me I'm not allowed to be. And I get really frustrated by that because I think as casual fans of Michael, no one's a casual fan, but you know what I mean? People who don't go do the homework on Michael, people assume that we're not allowed to. We're not allowed to play his music anymore. We're not allowed to support him. And that's all because of this documentary, Leaving Neverland, that's sort of jumping on this myth of Michael, which is a very serious allegation that I understand a lot of people want to take seriously. But this documentary, we'll call it, is really filled with some lies. But I want you to elaborate, because I've seen you out there, and I want to hear your side of the story. Tell me about this sort of documentary in your mind. What is this?
The documentary to me is a hit piece. It was designed that way. It was designed to be one-sided, but not only designed to be one-sided, it was designed to destroy someone's legacy. And there are no facts in the documentary. Just everything is hearsay. Everything is, and I think the thing that bothers me most is that no one went and researched this documentary, even though we warned HBO, we warned Channel 4, we warned them all that, hey, look, there's so many lies in this, but they didn't care. They shoved it down everyone's throats anyway. And I think that was the frustrating thing for us, is that we knew that these two guys, James and Wade, were just going after, I mean, this was a financial incentive for them, and we knew that. But it didn't matter, because it was the whole swell of the Me Too movement and the Time's Up. So they kind of rode behind that, and it became, you can't question this. You have to believe, quote unquote victims in that case. And that was it. That was, you couldn't even talk about it and be on the other side. And I thought that was so unfair.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, because I think most people, the argument, let's get right to it, because the argument was like, well, you're his nephew. How can you be unbiased about this? Of course you're going to defend his legacy. Of course you're going to try and, you have money to claim. The Jacksons are losing money. But as I've heard you talk about this, like, you're not making a dime on this. You don't make money off of Michael's residuals, correct?
No, I wish I did. I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be on some island or something. I think the thing is that what the media didn't do is, I mean, there were plenty of coworkers and people like that worked at Neverland, that were around all the time, that spoke out in defense of Michael. But the media never, I don't even want to say, they didn't even acknowledge them, is the truth of the matter in that fact. I mean, my cousin Brandi being someone, yes, she's family, but she dated Wade for over 7 years. And we had such a media blackout in that case where none of the media wanted to talk to Brandi. Brandi was actually told, and we were told behind the scenes, that they were scared to talk to Brandi because Brandi invalidated Wade's claims. And so we were railroaded.
How, like, can you share some of that? Like, what would Brandi have offered to do that?
Well, Brandi dated Wade during the time period, exactly the time period that Wade is claiming that he was sexually abused by Michael Jackson, or was in love with Michael Jackson.
So then a very important witness, right, to justify all that.
In that way. And not to mention, Wade had a crush on Brandi, and my uncle was the one that set them up together, which is the most ridiculous thing, because in the documentary, they claim that Michael taught them to hate women, and that Michael wanted them all to themselves. So why would my uncle introduce Wade and Brandi together and kind of champion their relationship? So these are kind of inconsistencies that Brandi kind of throws a wrench in that equation. But if he's having that kind of relationship, clearly he knows the difference between one relationship and the other, which is what he claims he didn't know.
Right. Well, it's tough, because there's so many things that aren't revealed, or people they didn't speak to, that really prove that this isn't a documentary. It is a one-sided take on things, and I think that's what's most frustrating.
Well, they weren't even truthful about it. I mean, Dan Reed, as the lies were being uncovered, he started editing the movie. So depending on what release was, in which country, the edit got shorter and shorter. The runtime got shorter and shorter. So it's like, oh, well, that's a lie. Okay, we'll take that out then. And that's so dishonest in a way. When you find out at the very end, Wade's over there burning supposedly Michael Jackson memorabilia, but he sold all his memorabilia, beforehand, and he got called out, by the auction place, saying, no, Wade already sold his stuff. So what you saw was a staged showing at the very end of Leaving Neverland. Well, they took out that part. They took out the dinner part that I was physically at, where I called them on it.
Well, I mean, you're pointing out these things. Like, I saw another article where they go through and they've reshot things to sort of up the emotional manipulation of it. And to me, it's like,
well, the ring scene.
For those who've watched the documentary, but what's frustrating in all of this, I mean, we can go through as many as you want to, but what's frustrating with all of it is you can go online. There's so many Michael Jackson fans and people who have really done the homework to sort of prove out the inconsistencies of the documentary. But what's so frustrating is, like, I don't know. I think sure you can manipulate a documentary. It's a film in a way. Like you can obviously in editing my show, like I can do those things. But on such a serious subject matter with these two people who are the victims, I can't imagine going back and say, can we retape that or can we fake that? And just it seems so far from how serious that topic is. I wouldn't want anything to be done or shot that could muddy the waters of truth,
Jeopardize,
right?
yeah.
It just puts a lot of the exactly. So I imagine that frustrates you.
It does, especially with the the ring scenario, and that's one of the things with James or Jimmy with the ring. That was shot. I forgot how long it was. It was probably, I think it's either 7 or 17 months after they shot their initial stuff. So basically, to me, as someone that is a director and someone that it felt like, oh well, we need a stronger ending. So let's do, can we come and do this? Because he's pretending that he's in the same location, the same outfit. And so it's just disingenuous, like, to me in that way. And it bothers me because Jimmy and James is someone that I want to throw, like when I see it, I want to throw my shoe at the screen. Wade, I know is lying just because I know Wade very well. But James is one of those people that I feel like I see his acting a mile away. Now, to other people that can get triggered because they're using certain words which are designed to trigger you, yes, you're not going to see it. But a lot of people see through that.
Well, yeah, it's really frustrating because if I was interviewing a abuse survivor, I'm not going to go to that person and say, hey, you know what? Let's go recreate these shots together to make it more intense. I really do believe that's a very strange. It just shows that the subjects were in on it, that they were creating a narrative with the filmmaker where I feel like the filmmaker should be separate from its subjects, right? It's like, he was
intervening. He was giving them words. Like when he's, there's one shot where, Wade's talking and Wade says, my friend or something like that. And you hear Dan Reed go, and my lover. And then he goes, and my lover. And it's like, if you don't see the manipulation behind that in that aspect of it. But to me, I mean, you have to I think the thing with Leaving Neverland, it was designed at a time that everyone was emotionally very vulnerable. Mm-hmm. I think it's one of those things is that if people resaw it today that had seen it, they would see through the lies and they would see the acting in it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know which parent would be smiling about reminiscing about the good old times, knowing that their kid was abused. Here you have both parents smiling, talking about how great the old days were with Michael Jackson. And it's like, no, you would not have that emotion. You'd be pissed all the way through. You would have the sense of, this guy betrayed me. This guy lied to us. He hooked us in. You wouldn't have the, oh my gosh, the good old days and all that stuff. And that shows that I think it's just frustrating because to me, it shows what they're really after.
Right. Well, and I want to get to more of this. This conversation is sort of two-parter because there's pointing out the lies of this documentary, and then there's also sort of the aftermath. And I want to get to that because I want to get to know how, because you knew Michael, you grew up with him, you were at the same age that James was and hanging out with him. I want to know about that. I want to know how this has affected the family. I want to get to all of that because I think that's important stuff that needs to be talked about that people aren't really talking about. But I want to give us more time and you the time to really go through and prove why it's false, because it's frustrating to me to see so many people just buy it, just take it. And while I took my time and sort of didn't want to get involved until I at least watched it and understood and looked into my evidence, as I have now sat with it all, I don't feel like it's a fair look. I guess you could do this would be me, right? Okay, that's two persons' perspective, but he's not here to defend himself. I'm not going to go burn his CDs and remove his Simpsons episode and do all the things that have been done. These two people had years to call this out. And I think the thing that makes me most visceral about it, and I want you to elaborate, but James Wade particularly perjured himself in a court of law. And if Michael Jackson really was he let him molest other children, is really, if you really go about it.
Yeah.
And that to me makes me very angry at James. I'm sorry. And it's like,
and Wade, yeah.
Wade lied, right? Wade, correct me, because you know more than I am trying to do but Wade lied and said he was asked to be and didn't, but then he was never even asked to be on that jury too, right? They both were sort of really manipulative and lying through all that, because it's very important. We mentioned Michael Jackson was never convicted of anything, and he was put through the ringer by
Yeah.
by the biggest powers that could be. If there was ever a chance, we would have found out, was he really it was that period, and they didn't do it.
No, they didn't do it. And let me ask you a question, especially if this is a kid that you molested 100 times, why would you want him to be your first defense witness? You know, he's there with all, you know, police officers, security, everyone. This is the safest place he could possibly be, you know, when he takes the stand. Why would you say, you know what, I want this guy to defend me? This is going to be the first Wade is going to be the first person I put on stand to defend me. It doesn't make sense. And that's the thing with this whole Michael Jackson thing, is that if you use common sense, right then everything gets blown out of the water. But they don't want you to. They want you to use emotion. Right. The thing. They want you to be riled up, and if they can capture the emotion, common sense goes out the window. And that's the thing with this, is that, you know, Wade not only was the first, defense witness. Wade comes out of the court with, you know, with the peace sign and smiling and all that stuff, but he wants to make it seem like in Leaving Neverland, wants to make it seem like he was forced to testify. And it's like, you just have to put two and two together. And that's the thing that why the fans and the family and the friends of Michael are so pissed off, is because the media can do that, but they aren't doing that.
Yeah, you know, there's been different times where it'll just be me and Michael. Then there'll be other times where he has other friends over too. That's what Brett said, it's just a slumber party. We just have a lot of fun.
And, you know, I've slept in the same bed as Michael. It's just, you watch cartoons, you fall asleep. You know, it's just a friendship. And I know he would never do anything to hurt my brother. He's the nicest guy you've ever met.
I've been there when these kids have been in Michael's room. I've been there with them. It's just party time. They watch videos, they eat junk food, they play video games. They play so hard, they fall asleep. They're exhausted, they fall asleep. There's nothing more to it than that.
From your standpoint, does it seem unusual for a 34-year-old man to have kids sleeping over?
Not when you know Michael's background. Under normal circumstances, possibly yes. But Michael, everybody knows he didn't have a childhood.
He's a good guy.
He's a good guy?
Yeah.
Show me where he touched you. No nonsense, no shenanigans, but he's a weird guy.
Why was it important for you to stick up for him?
Because he's always been a friend of me.
That's what you do for friends, you tell the truth.
I'm starting on Cirque du Soleil Michael Jackson show, which is exciting and terrifying all at the same time, because it's such a huge responsibility. But that was why I took it on. You know, Michael was such a huge part of my career and life. We were friends for 20 years before he passed, since I was 7. So it's an opportunity for me to give back a little bit to his legacy. It's such a big part of his legacy, and to make sure as much as I can that it's done right and that it really represents his essence.
We had decades to sort of write off Michael Jackson, right? To say, well, he must be a child molester, even though he wasn't convicted. It doesn't matter. And now it seems like every celebrity, Hollywood, every media outlet, they're all just sort of going back and rewriting the history as if, well, yeah, we always knew he was guilty then. I don't know why we didn't see it then, but now clearly, because two people who clearly have monetary advantages here to do this, now that they're coming out, well, he must. But when I look at it as objectively, I go, well, we didn't. I want to get to that, because there are some issues I have with Michael, and I've talked about this. The sleeping in the bed. We'll get there. I think Michael wasn't perfect. Michael had a tough childhood. We're going to get to all that. But what's frustrating is this rewriting of history. I imagine that's really scary for you, because we went decades where we didn't have a problem, right? And then suddenly, after his death, it's easy to sort of burn his music, get rid of him, push him out. How is that fair?
It's not fair, but I feel like they've always been waiting for their opportunity to do this. When 2009 hit and he passed, they probably would have wanted to do that, but everyone was celebrating Michael at the time. And so it became more lucrative, because the media is all about money. And so if it's more lucrative to celebrate the person, they will do that. If it becomes more lucrative to try and destroy someone's legacy, they will do that. There's really no moral high ground that they have, or moral stance that they have. So I think that's the thing with the media, is that right now, because of the Me Too movement and Time's Up, it's more lucrative to try and destroy someone's legacy in that way, because you can have many articles, many follow-ups and everything like that. Doesn't matter if he's innocent or guilty. It's just, they can always claim, well, I got it from this information or that information, my hands are clean, which they are, but that's what they always do.
Well, so let's go back, because you've and I know there's probably people watching this and go, oh, come on, yeah, he totally said those kids. What are you talking about, Andy?
There will always be people like that.
You can't win everybody.
It's how you can't win everyone. I mean, we look at our politics now, and there's a complete divide, and there's certain people that you can't change one way or the other. They're going to have their set views, and it's what baggage you bring with it in that way. If you were someone that was molested as a child, like I was on my mom's side of the family, then you have a different emotional response. You might say, well, I believe them because I was molested, and it's just, you don't even know why you're agreeing with them, but it's just because you just sense that in that way. And so it's really hard. You can't, that's why I always go off of, I put my emotions beside, and I go off of fact and evidence, because emotions can lead you astray. The thing for me, especially, is like people say, well, yeah, you're his family member, you have to defend him. And that's not true at all, because being someone that has been abused on my mom's side of the family, if I really honestly thought there was 1% chance that he could have done something, or that I saw something in the tens of thousands of hours that I was with him, I wouldn't be here. I would be probably on the other side, marching with everyone and doing all this stuff, because I'm a person about justice. And anyone that knows me I've been consistent all my life about that. And so that's what's frustrating. It's like, oh, let's, because he's family, we're going to discount him. And that's not true at all.
With your past, which you would have a different eye than a lot of people. And I mentioned as Corey Feldman was another one who sort of has been very vocal in support of Michael, who also was abused in his past, and really, really vocal, just like how he would say, no, I know. And trust me, I know what a looks like, because I had sadly with him.
And you have a keen eye to it too. It's like you have a heightened sense in a way, because you're looking, it's like the world's changed for you. Now you're looking for it, as opposed to where you are blinded by it before. I always say it's like a woman that she's been abused by her husband, and then now here's her best friend who's coming with like bruise marks that she's covering with makeup. That woman that had been abused by her husband, she's very aware that her friend is being abused or not being abused, because she knows what those things are that person is going through. Even if the friend says, oh no, I just fell down the stairs and but I was clumsy or whatever, that you know the pattern, you sense it right then and there. And that's the thing with this whole thing. I'm not blinded by it. If anything, I'm more aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who have defended his character. I mean, his Lisa Marie, Debbie Rowe, all these people.
The people that spent the most time with him. That's the funniest thing. It's like you have Wade and James that, when you really look at it, they've exaggerated how much time they spent with Michael. But then you have the people that have spent the most time with him at young ages, and they're all out there adamantly defending him.
Well, I think the biggest thing we have to tackle here, which is probably the one that most people are like, what the hell, is it all started, I think, really to a head with that Martin Bashir documentary, where Michael did the interview and said, it's innocent. Sleeping with a boy, of course, there's nothing wrong with sleeping in the same bed with children. I remember that interview, watching that on TV, and I was aghast, because I'm like, what? Wait, what? And I always sort of thought, well, that's weird. But then I've looked into more, and I talked to you, and I want you to sort of address this, because I think this is one of the biggest sort of hurdles for a lot of people to jump over. It was something Macaulay Culkin said in an interview, where he said, look, you got to understand, Michael's bedroom was 2 stories with pinball machines and couches, and like when we say we were in his bed, we were in a amusement park. That's what that meant. At the same time, people have said, Corey was like, dude, he wouldn't even swear with us. He was so like buttoned up. Like that was just not the person Michael was. The innocence, as people say, was a real thing because of the problems he had through his childhood. So can you help elaborate and sort of shine a light on that? You were there. How do people get over that hurdle of, well, he was sleeping in the bed with children, he's got to be guilty?
Yeah, I think the wording is very important too. Even though it's the same exact thing, I think when you say sleeping with, which is not the words he used, he's sharing a bed with. When you say sleeping with, people automatically have a sexual connotation to it. Who did you sleep with? In that way. And that's the media that had put those words out there in terms of like, oh, he slept in the bed with kids and stuff like that. And it's psychologically supposed to be that way in terms of that, nowhere did my uncle ever say, and no kid has ever said, oh, he snuggled with us and he put his arm over me and all that stuff. It's like their perception of it, which someone that had slumber parties and stuff like that with me and my brothers as well. This was, and Macaulay said it too. You fall asleep sometimes watching cartoons or Three Stooges or whatever, and it's like everyone would just pile on the bed and just hang out.
Nothing happened, I mean, nothing really. I mean, we played video games, we played it at an amusement park. Well, the thing is with that whole thing is that, they go, oh, you slept in the same bedroom as him. It's like, I don't think you understand. Michael Jackson's bedroom is 2 stories. And it has like 3 bathrooms and this and that. So when I slept in his bedroom, yeah, but you have to understand the whole scenario. And the thing is with Michael is that he's not very good at explaining himself, and he never really has been, because he's not a very social person. I mean, you're talking about someone who's been sheltered and sheltering himself also for the last 30 years, or and so he's not very good at communicating to people and not very good at conveying what he's actually trying to say to you. And so when he says something like that, people, he doesn't quite understand why people react the way that they do.
I understand what people think about that, in that way, but you have to start listening to the people that were around that atmosphere, girls and boys, which they don't ever mention the girls, like Nicole Richie and other people that have hung out with him and done that, sleepovers and slumber parties and stuff like that. They don't mention that aspect of it because the narrative is young boys in that way.
Certainly when I made the documentary, there was a small part of that which contained a controversy concerning his relationship with other young people. But the truth is that he was never convicted of any crime. I never saw any wrongdoing myself. And whilst his lifestyle may have been a bit unorthodox, I don't believe it was criminal. And I think the world has now lost the greatest entertainer it's probably ever known.
When I see it, I think about my 7-year-old, my kids. Like, there's an innocence where they don't know about. They're not thinking it that way.
They're not even,
right. They want a summer. Yeah, we can all stay over together in the hotel and do it. Like, that's just what they look forward to, that in an innocent way. And so I guess it really comes down to, well, shouldn't he have known better that was sort of a weird thing to do with children, right? That's where I think I have the wrestling, and I think where it sounds like you do too, of just like he probably should have. But elaborate if you can, like why didn't he? What was it that sort of didn't let him click that in his brain?
His heart. I think it was his heart, to be honest with you, because if you don't have that in you, it's like, if there's a gay man that is not attracted to women, I don't care what side of the bed they share or whatever, that's not going through his mind in that way. And I think that's the same thing with my uncle with kids. It's like he never looked at them that way. So that was the farthest thing that he was thinking. And so he didn't even think anything was wrong with it, to the point where he said it out loud. That's the thing. It's like he wasn't hiding it. He said it out loud in that way, because to him there was nothing wrong with it, because he wasn't doing anything wrong. And I think that's the thing, is that when you say bed, we think, oh, well, this is, bump and grind and all that stuff. But if you think about a bed is just somewhere where you sleep. It's the same thing as a couch. If they said, oh, well, they fell asleep on the couch and watching TV, no one would say anything. But it's like, oh, they fell asleep in the bed watching TV. Oh, wow, the bed. Okay, here we go. And I think that's the thing, is that it's words that we use, and it's kind of, I don't want to say society, because, I grew up in the society too, so I understand that. But you got to remember, my uncle wasn't like everyone else in that way. He didn't have that childhood, and he grew up where, and this is hard for certain people to understand, but it's easier for other people to understand. He never saw something wrong with an adult-kid relationship, because he was that kid that was befriended by adults, whether it was, Diana Ross, Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder. He was that kid that had adult friends and close friends because they were his label mates. And that's the thing. So to him, there was never that, where we would be like, well, that's just wrong. A man and a kid, being friends, it's like, that's the thing. It's the time of it. And it's hard to explain in a way, but then it isn't in certain ways, because I always use the Back to the Future thing, with Doc Brown and Marty. It's like their relationship's never explained, but it didn't have to be explained, because you don't think, oh, well, this is dirty because, they're so close together in that way, because that's not what your mind goes to. But for somehow 30 years of media propaganda, that's what your mind goes to when it comes to Michael Jackson.
Well, so let's go, because I have two thoughts to that I want to, because I think this is an important part to talk about, because I think that is always the crux where people either believe or don't, right? And I think but there's probably some people who will say, well, that sounds like an excuse, because why wouldn't he know better? But I think my follow-up question too is then, well, let's talk about the lack of innocence and sort of his upbringing, because from everything I've read, like, he came from an abused family. He never really he was a child star at the youngest level. We got to remember with the Jackson 5, like, such a young age where it was like he really had no reality of just what normal life was like. He was a huge celebrity. At what age was that? That was like 6, 7?
Probably, I think 7, 8. He started like traveling and touring and stuff like that. By 10, he was internationally famous in that way, and so.
And that's people got to remember, like, that's a huge thing. And then not only that, but then he became a global star, and then it continued to a level that I think, before the age of social media, even, it's just there still aren't, I don't think, celebrities to the level that there was of Michael Jackson.
No, and you got to remember, with all the celebrities that they are, like the Disney stars, all of them go through some kind of problems or whatever because of a young age. They became famous or this or that. It's like he had to live that through public life in that way and through media scrutiny and all that stuff. And it's hard for me because I understand a lot of what he went through in that way. And I understand when we would be, me and my brothers would be with him, and he would ask us, what's it like to have a birthday party? What's it like to have friends, And it's like certain things that we took for granted in terms of just going to a friend's birthday party or hanging out or Halloween, stuff like that regular people go through and we take for granted in that way. He never got to do that. He would be singing, and he talked about this. He'd be singing in the studio and see the kids playing across the street, in the park and be kind of envious of them in a way. And I wish I was doing that in that aspect. So a lot of my uncle's thing was just reclaiming his childhood and reclaiming the things that he didn't get to do. And the interesting thing, and I understand it's because I had to live a certain life because my uncle was so famous that I had to be careful with what I did. And I was like, I think I was 12 when he got, maybe 11 or 10 when he got his Hollywood Walk of Fame star and all that stuff. So I knew from a young age I represented the family and I represented him. So when it came down to, school and partying at older ages and booze and all that stuff, I couldn't be there at those parties, at those underage drinking parties or whatever. But I'll tell you, I live vicariously through my friends because they could do that. And I think that's the thing that people have to understand with my uncle, is that a lot of it was just reclaiming his childhood and living vicariously through people that he can identify with.
Yeah, no, and for me, if anybody's at fault, to me, I've always been most aggressively against the parents who sort of allowed them to sort of stay overnight. It's like, I don't care who it is. My best friends, I'd still like, you want to sleep overnight with an adult? A parent should just not do that. I don't think there was an intent. That's the question of, was there intent once that happened? But I still find it weird that parents would do that. But then I think about it and I go, well, he's Michael Jackson. Everyone's sort of in awe of what happened. And you get to a level of fame where I really do believe I believe this, of just there's an innocent version of Michael just wanted to have slumber parties. He missed that. Being with kids is sort of a nice, fun thing to do. It's all the other nonsense of the world, the dramas put away. You get to just have Nerf fights and just watch movies and do, like, honestly, as a parent, like, I love my phase with a kid, right? I don't want him to grow up and become a jaded teenager. Like, so I can understand there is like a little bit of you maybe get lost in your head as a celebrity of, well, yeah, sure, I can do this. Why not? The parents are even letting me. Who cares? And then it just, takes a couple bad apples to say, oh, well, did he touch you? What happened? And then suddenly things clearly go off the rails. So I find it really frustrating where people just are so set in their way that, no, he must have done something, where you can't see both sides. How do you know that? How are you so sure?
And just remember, it's the parent. It was the, with 93, 94 thing, it was the parent. The kid never, the kid initially said nothing happened. And so it's always been, as I always say, it's always been money driven. It's always been like, hey, you know what we can get out of Michael if we do this or say this in that way. And it's James, they always like to say James and Wade, and they say the boys or the young, they're adults now. And now they're going after him because now they know that they can get money in that aspect of it. It has nothing to do with the truth, which the truth is nothing happened. It has to do with, hey, I'm in financial hardship right now, and Michael's always been a money pot, so let's go after his estate now.
Yeah,
and I think
that is the most telling, because it's like, why do they need money? They seem to be enjoying the life in the spotlight and the interviews. Where it's frustrating to me is like, I don't know if anything, James Wade has put himself, by slandering himself, he should be able to take a hit and say, you know what, this is important to me. I don't want a dime. If he was doing that to a Wade, I think he'd have a little bit more. I might believe
it's always been about money.
But
it's always been about money, and it's always been about fame to them as well. In that, I mean, not only Wade writing, in his book that it's time for me to get mine, and my story will make me, my story of abuse will make me relatable / relevant. He's always, because you got to remember, Wade came from that era that he was choreographing NSYNC and Britney and all that stuff. So he got that taste of fame, So certain people, when they have that taste of fame, they don't care where it comes from again. They want that again. I mean, it's being, and I think with Wade, he knows being tied to Michael Jackson will get him fame no matter what. And you'd say, well, why would he want to attach his name to that? That's something negative. But you got to think about it. There's people that have assassinated people, like John Lennon and Selena.
Yeah.
They wanted to attach their name permanently to these people. It was the ultimate, I guess, prize in their aspect of it. And so, yes, people do crazy stuff for that reason, to be relevant. And that's the thing with Wade. I see it a mile away, and I just wish people would ask questions. That's the thing. It's like, we're in a place right now, you can't even ask questions to them, because it's like, oh, you're attacking the victim, in that way. And it's just, you got to ask questions. You have to get the facts, and they have no facts, so make them have facts.
Since you know him, why can I just say, well, Taj must know? What is it about your sort of history that makes it clear that Wade is not telling the truth?
First of all, I was there at the 2005 trial. So I was with my uncle every day for that trial. I lived at Neverland. So I saw who came in, saw who came out, and all that stuff. Wade's family came one time, or not one time, but came in to do their testimony and all that stuff. I personally thank Wade that the day after his testimony, or the day of his testimony. I forgot which one it was, but it definitely wasn't the day before, which is what he's claiming it was.
But wait, just to interrupt, because I think it's important, we reiterate this, and you go ahead and do it. But Wade came forward and just gave the most exonerating testimony in that case that your uncle was up against. And I've heard jurors, everybody have just said that was the testimony that really was the
through
cross-examination,
through rigorous cross-examination, never wavered, and he did that when he was younger too, when they deposed him. And there's film of him saying the same exact stuff. And then here he is, I thanked him and I remember specifically because I was a little shy back then, and I was thinking, I'm like, should I thank these guys? It was both him and Brett Barnes were there, and I'm like, you know what, these guys testified, for my uncle, and they deserve my thanks. And I'll never forget, Wade was there. He was with his fiance at the time, who became his wife, Amanda, and he was so excited to show my uncle this project that he was working on, this film or something. And I only remember it because I had to connect the TV. I was like the one that kind of might know how to do it in that way. And so we got it going, and my uncle saw it. And it's just like, it pisses me off because him going back and making it sound like my uncle was a monster. And here's this guy that basically, Wade wanted to get married at Neverland, in 2005 to Amanda. It's like, name one victim abuse, survivor that wants to get married at the place that they supposedly got, hundreds of times. Those are the kind of things that are logical that people don't even know about, but also, and it's been out there, but it's like common sense would tell you this guy is lying. He's lying through his teeth. He was, my experience with Wade is when my uncle passed as well. He was trying to get to the memorial. We just had Kobe's memorial. Wade was desperately trying to get into Michael Jackson memorial. Through a mutual friend, I heard about this, and I contacted Wade. I had the email. I put it on Twitter. text message. And basically Wade was so ecstatic, and he wrote down every family member he had basically, to get there. And so I was the one responsible for getting Wade to the memorial. And that when he thanked me so much, and he was, so happy about it and stuff like that. So it's like, I hear stories like that. And also I hear the stories of like, he was, within 24 hours of my uncle passing, he was, pitching a tribute show to So You Think You Can Dance, he danced behind Janet at the MTV Awards when they had a tribute to Michael. So you have to realize, like, I don't know many victims, that would be doing those things. When Wade turned was when he got denied the Cirque du Soleil job. He was going after the Michael Jackson won Cirque du Soleil job to be the head choreographer / director, and the state turned him down. And it was during that time period, that's when he started writing his book on abuse. And I think that's very telling in terms of almost like, oh, well, you're going to do this to me. Well, I'm going to do this to you. And that's the thing that bothers me, is that people can't even see through that.
And then what's your feelings on James? Just so because we talk a lot on Wade, and I see most people, but why do you think James got in on this too?
James financially, if you actually look at his financial records of his family, they needed to get money. James, I think, financially joined Wade, I think a day after he received something about his family being sued for X amount of money or some financial situation. So there's a financial timing to it for James in that way. And he had seen Wade on TV. So it's like, hey, if I get in on this too, I can get some money.
Well, I was gonna say, why? I mean, it's I know why, because you're gonna say he didn't do it. But what's weird to me is, if he did do it, why wouldn't more people come forward at this opportunity? I almost feels like the documentary was made in a way to sort of hope that others were going to come out of the woodwork and say, yeah, and no one did.
And no one will. That's the thing. And if they do, it's going to be someone that is desperately in need of money financially. And now it's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this now. But all the people that have hung out with them are financially secure. And I don't mean in terms of money. I just meant they're happy with what they have in that way. And so they have great memories in that way. And they're not going to throw their friend, down the river for some bucks, which is something that you either have or you don't have in your system. And that's the thing. James has it in his system. Wade has it in his system. And I think that's the difference. We've all had friends that we know that are capable of, morality issues in terms of like, I'm going to throw this person under the bus because I need to get a step ahead, or financially this will make sense. And unfortunately with my uncle, it's compounded, because we're not talking about thousands of dollars. We're talking about millions of dollars.
Yeah, I know it's crazy. I mean, and the other thing that was frustrating to me to watch was, I don't know how much you want to, or if you want to get into this, but I was frustrated by how much Oprah was involved in all of it, because Oprah has, in my memory of things, Oprah was very, and I went back to remind, Oprah has been very for Michael Jackson. Oprah got a lot of opportunities. Her first interview on TV, interviewed the children. It felt like constantly was sort of on Michael's side, and then really out of nowhere got involved in this film, was almost too involved in the film for me to sort of feel comfortable, and it just felt like a betrayal in a way. I've seen you tweet about it too, to an extent too. Do you have thoughts on Oprah and sort of how that all went down?
Well, let's get one thing straight. My uncle gave Oprah the biggest interview, in the world, basically. I think 93 million people saw it. It was a record-breaking interview. He chose Oprah to do the interview, and put her on the map internationally. A lot of my family members weren't happy with that interview because she was going into personal things in terms of like plastic surgery and stuff like that. But then when she circled back around when my uncle passed and was, after the kids and my grandma, that was the thing that I think didn't sit well with people, because then I was there at that point. I didn't want her to do the interview, but other people did and stuff like that because she had such a big audience. And she kept telling us, she was like, oh no, Michael was misunderstood. I want the world to know who he truly was, and who better than his kids and his mom and all that stuff. And Oprah's always been about ratings and always been about what is best for her. And so she can be very manipulative and talk through one side of her face, but really mean something else. And I think that was the scenario with Oprah. So when this came about, this was a timing issue for her. They knew that without Oprah or some kind of big push behind it, it was going to fall flat, because it really came down to the two people talking, and there would have been more scrutiny on them. But Oprah did a special right after that, blessed it, basically saying, no, you can't question these people. And I'm going to make an audience of child abuse survivor guests that are sitting in the audience that can clap every time they say something, to really sink in your head that this guy's a monster. And I think that was it was pure propaganda, pure media. I don't want to say manipulation / intimidation, because there's not many people that will go against Oprah in terms of celebrities, in that way. And so it shut down all of my uncle's support. People that would naturally have come for his defense saying, well, I know Michael. They were scared to go against Oprah. Now, what a year of difference makes, everyone's starting to see Oprah's and, true colors, in terms of like, oh, she's not, she's very hypocritical, and she chooses who she goes after in that way. And she's very, she'll take a blind eye to something, but then go after something else and claim, Oprah not only did the special, don't forget, she had on in her magazine or her paper or whatever, it's time to say goodbye to Michael. So she had a whole section and whole list. She had Ellen tweet about it. She had all these people tweet about it. So it was a strategic attack that just came like bombs from everywhere. So that was the problem. No one had the chance to go, well, I don't believe this, until Dave Chappelle, basically famously said that, in his comedy special. And he was thinking he said what a lot of people were thinking. And I thank God for him that he was able to say that as a comedian, but also had some truth to it. Because when he said that about Wade and James, a lot of people felt a sigh of relief, like, I can say this now. I can say I don't believe him too, which it was just taboo to say.
No, it's fascinating. You're totally right. It was Oprah endorsed it and made Hollywood sort of say, you can't ignore this anymore. And then you're right. Everyone in Hollywood and everywhere just, well,
Simpsons
Oprah
and all that stuff.
Oprah said it. Yeah, Simpsons pulled their episode.
Oprah.
Exactly. Weird Al pulled his parody songs from the tour. I was really sad. My kid was really excited to hear Eat It. It just wasn't fair.
Weird Al is, people like that really bother me, and I have nothing against him. But I was on phone calls with my uncle and Weird Al when, because my uncle would put certain things on speaker, and, just because we were around. And this guy was begging my uncle for, to use certain songs, for his career and all that stuff. And then this is the payback that my uncle gets, is that you can't even go and look at the research. You're just going to yank something like that. And I think that's so disrespectful in that way. He built his career off my uncle, and this is what he does.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to him, because I like Weird Al.
I love
Weird Al. He didn't come out and hate Michael. I think he played it safe, right? And I think that's still not helpful, right?
Safe.
Exactly,
Yeah,
safe. I think we're at a point now where I think you're vocal about it, and I think it's fair. Weird Al should hear it. Weird Al. We want to hear the songs again.
I loved Weird Al. That's the problem.
Right, and I think, that's the point, though, of like the fact that Weird Al, The Simpsons, these things I love are just feel the pressure to not be able to do what they want. That's where it's getting so scary as a society, because it just takes one powerful person or a mob of people to say, you know what, don't do this, or you're supporting a pedophile. And that's there's no evidence to say that that's fact. And the guy's not with us, and the guy has children. All of these things just make me so frustrated with our society of what are we doing? Like, why are we so quick to judge?
No evidence. I mean, here we are, we're, not even when my uncle passed, which is 10 years ago or whatever, throughout his whole, 30 years, they've been trying to tack this onto him since 93. There's not one shred of evidence, one in 30 years, off and on the FBI, investigated them secretly for 10 years, not one shred of evidence that suggests he's a child molester. They've raided his house, Havenhurst, Neverland twice, not one shred of evidence. So it's like, since when does common sense say, well, maybe he wasn't then?
There is so much more that I talk about with Taj, and you can continue this conversation by watching part 2 of this documentary, where we go through the 10 undeniable facts about Michael Jackson, which aren't actually facts. If you have a story that you think needs to be heard, please submit it to me on social media. If you'd like to support this series moving forward, you can by visiting our new Hugging the Cactus Patreon. You can also learn more by going to uncancelled.com. Thanks for watching.